Well, my guest today, I'm pretty certain, is a time traveler because it's already a day ahead of me where he is in New Zealand. In all seriousness, my guest today is not just a highly experienced voice actor of over 20 years. He is also the head of Gravy for the Brain Oceania and runs his own voice acting academy in New Zealand. Please welcome to the podcast, Toby Ricketts. Toby, it's a pleasure to have you on, man.
Absolutely a pleasure to be on here, Mr. Schmidt. Thank you very much for having me.
You and I met on a webinar that was the brainchild of our dear mutual friend, Dervla Trainer. And that was called, what was that called? Global
Voiceover Summit, I think.
There we go. Something like that. I got in trouble for the word global. I do remember that. And then we got to chat a little bit on your podcast, and now we're over to expose you to the good folks of North America here. Exactly. So I've been looking forward to this for a long time. First of all, I know some folks here in the States and in Canada, maybe even in the UK, are familiar with you through your work with Gravy for the Brain. So let's start there. You are the head of Gravy for the Brain Oceania, and I'm not even sure everybody here knows what Oceania is. So let's start there.
Sure, absolutely. Oceania, as far as I'm aware, thank you for having me, by the way. I've been looking forward to this too. It's going to be a fantastic chat. Oceania is Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands.
Which
is basically most of the Pacific, like right across to American Samoa and Hawaii.
Okay,
the dateline basically. So that's sort of like the ocean, as it was, but not Asia. So it stops up at sort of Indonesia and those archipelagos up in the very stiflingly hot and humid regions. But primarily, I mean, to be honest, we don't get that many people from the Pacific Islands because the population is so low, and it's mostly Australia and New Zealand that I deal with. So it's kind of, we call it Oceania, but primarily it's Australia and New Zealand.
How did you get hooked into Gravy for the Brain, and then how did that come to Oceania?
Funny story, actually, with Gravy for the Brain, because when back in the misty days of, that time when you're a voiceover, when you're kind of in your third year of going like full-time professional, and it's gone pretty well, and you're kind of like finding gigs here, there, and everywhere, and like little things, and still sort of trying to prove to yourself that you can do this. And it's all okay. And week to week is fine. I came across, I wish I could remember where I heard about it, but I heard about this competition called the One Voice Awards that Gravy for the Brain were running for the first time. And it was like it was a competition for voiceover. And I was like, well, of course I want to enter a competition. The only criteria was that it was a British company, so you had to have a British passport. And lo and behold, I am originally from England. I moved over to New Zealand when I was 14 years old in 1994. So I do have a British passport. So I entered this competition. I threw everything I had at it. I threw all these jobs that I'd done for it, like some stuff. I think back in the day I did some stuff for Facebook, and I did a few other sort of big brand stuff. And then just forgot it, as you do. Like, to stay sane in this game, you do your best stuff, you throw it at the wall, and you walk away. And
send it and forget it. Yep,
exactly. Send it and forget it. So I sent it into this competition. And about, when was it? It was about, I don't know, a few months later, I got a call from Hugh Edwards, who said, "Hi, it's Hugh Edwards. I'm the head of Gravy for the Brain and the One Voice Awards. I'm just wondering if you're going to come over to the UK for the awards ceremony, for the Voice Awards." And I was like, oh, have I won something? And he was like, we think you should come. I was like, oh, really? That's exciting. And I was like, we think you should come. So I was like, okay. So I committed to go over, and it was like the next week or something. So I literally booked flights.
Oh, wow.
And like for that, like I left on like a Friday. Of course, because of the time difference, I actually time traveled backwards. Like, so it's like when you travel from here, one way you lose a complete day, and the other way you gain a complete day. So it's like it's very strange in time traveling. But I arrived in the UK on like a Thursday night, and I had flights booked for the Sunday night to go home. So it was just a 72-hour thing. And I arrived and went to this amazing One Voice conference, which is just fantastic. You know how voice conferences are. They're just wonderful especially if it's your first one. You find all these people that they're in the same game as you, and everyone's got the same problems and challenges and everything. But anyway, I digress. So we go to the awards. I'm sitting down, and like the first category comes up, and I like win an award, and it's amazing. And long story short, I won 7 awards that evening.
Good Lord!
Basically everything I entered, including Voiceover of the Year. So it was a mixed reaction, because people were like, "Yay, he's won it again!" But everyone was like, "Hang on, he just came in from New Zealand, and he's leaving on the Sunday." I've arrived and scooped up all these awards and then left. Everyone's sort of dazed and confused. So that was my first introduction to the proper world of voiceover, and it kind of proved to me. I was like, wow, I think I can do this. I think I might be quite good at this, because I had no reference point up till then, and it's nice to sort of have that accolade just to prove to yourself that, because in New Zealand we're very isolated from the rest of the world, so I've had no contact with any other voiceovers really, or any other industry bodies. And then the next year rolls around. I'm like, well, I'm definitely entering this year because that was fun last year. I want to do it again.
It seemed to have gone rather well.
Exactly. And so I entered again, and I won I think 4 awards or 5 awards, including voiceover of the year that year as well. And at the end of the conference, Hugh and Peter were like, we'd like to talk to you about opening an Oceania division. And I still think it's mainly to stop me entering the awards and winning it, because now I'm an employee, I can't enter those awards. So,
it's a vast conspiracy.
But it's always nice to be invited back some years to do some judging and listen to all the entries that are put in. If anyone's ever judged awards or done casting, it teaches you so much about your own craft when you hear other people doing things and find what works and see what everyone else is doing. So
absolutely,
I encourage anyone to, if you ever get the chance to do casting or awards, to enjoy it and to do it. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because being in tiny New Zealand, halfway around the world, you mentioned the word community, right? And as a community builder myself, to me, that's one of the most powerful aspects of being a freelancer, being a voice actor, is this thing that we call the voice acting community. Talk about once you got hooked into, and then really had to build in New Zealand and Oceania, the community for Gravy for the Brain. Talk about that and what maybe some of the challenges are for, at least for yourself, when you didn't have a community, and then maybe on the other side of the glass too, as a community builder, what are you facing?
I'm an interesting mix of people in that I do like being around groups of people, but I'm also a little bit of a hermit. I live 4 hours north of Auckland, the main big city here in New Zealand, and 2 hours away from the next big city. So I'm really kind of in the middle of nowhere. There's a small town nearby where we get our groceries, etc. But I'm right in the bush, in the jungles of New Zealand, which is incredible that, its technology has allowed us to be able to do this now, remotely from wherever. But I always found that it was really nice and helpful to have this community sort of spirit, to feel like you had co-creators and co-voiceover artists that were doing the same thing as you, albeit in separate studios. So, Grave for the Brain was a good chance to do that. I always try and keep in touch with all my Voice Academy graduates as well, and to hear sort of their successes, etc. It's still kind of tough. If I lived in the big city, I would try and do some kind of meetup group where we do meet in person, because it's never quite the same hanging out sort of online. Right. But Grave for the Brain has really allowed me to form, friendships with upcoming voice actors from around the world who are sort of giving it a go, and you see them getting better and better each time, which is the really nice thing. Is that that's the real heartwarming thing, and really why I sort of stay in this in the voice training game. Because voice training, generally, there's been some stories, that have come out over the past few months and years of people being really exploitative, or people getting a bad rap sometimes, where people are just trying to sell voice reels to people who really aren't ready to record voice reels, for example. So at that point I sort of considered taking a step back and just being a voice artist as well. But I do really gain energy from introducing people to this world of voiceover, if they want to experience it and if they've got promise, and then seeing them improve every time we do coaching, or every time we do a session, because they're just listening to the stuff and getting better and better every time. And I'm a firm believer that in teaching something, even now after I've been doing it for 5 or 6 years, you learn something about your own craft. Every time you teach something, it really cements those things and you relearn those lessons. So it's been really useful for a bunch of reasons there.
I couldn't agree with you more. You obviously do the work for Gravy for the Brain Oceania. I have VOPro. You're teaching people the craft and the art of voice acting. I'm on the business side, but I have to agree with you. When you see people grow in whatever you're teaching them, and I get paid for it? Are you kidding me? It's almost like stealing, because it's so gratifying to watch people grow and to do things that they previously didn't believe that they could do. That is the most amazing thing to me. So good on you for that. And good on, I've got so much respect for Hugh and Peter and for the work that Gravy for the Brain does. A fantastic organization. I want to go back to you 14 years old, because you said you were a British citizen until 14. Let's hear about your story a little bit.
That's right. Yeah, I'm from Brighton originally, the party town on the south coast, 50 miles south of London. And born, I don't know, into a relatively normal sort of British family. But one thing I was obsessed by from very early on, from about 6 or 7 years ago, was audio. I was always fascinated by audio. One story my parents like to tell is that I took my baby monitor one day, after I was a baby, but I was probably, 7 years old. And I put the side that transmitted with the speaker out on the street. And I went into my bedroom and played music and talked into it like it was a radio station. So the people on the street were like, "What's this music and this child's voice coming to me from this balcony?" And it was me having my very first go at a radio station.
That's fantastic.
Which is pretty funny. So I was obsessed for a long time, and then we moved house into a bigger house. And at that point, I really kind of obsessed with audio and audio gear. So I used to take things apart. I used to go to sort of garage sales, pick up old tape players and amplifiers and turntables and take them apart, sometimes put them back together to see if they worked. But also I built up all this studio gear. So I bought a microphone, and I had a mixing desk that I got from some garage sale, and cobbled it all together. And I started doing radio shows onto cassette, as if it was a real broadcast. I've still got the whole bag, which is hilarious to listen to. And my friends would come over and we'd do, that kind of radio show things.
Sure.
So it was planted. This was about 8 years old. So this is sort of very early on. I really discovered this passion. And that passion has never left me. I'm still so fizzed about audio gear, working with audio. I've really grown up like an audio native, as it were, and learnt lots of lessons very early on by taking things apart and breaking things or doing various things like that. Then what happened then? Then moved from the UK when I was 14 years old. So kind of in the first years of high school, which was kind of would seem to be a tough time to move to another country, literally as far away as possible on the globe.
Another
you can move
continent,
away from
everything. Yeah,
absolutely, the other side of the world, another hemisphere. It's a radical shift. But it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because I wasn't really very happy in England, and it gave me a chance to kind of redefine myself, at that age, at that kind of formative age when you're sort of finding new friends. Interestingly, my accent, which you'll hear has got quite a Kiwi sound to it now, it changed within 2 weeks of me being here.
Wow.
So when I was a little pom back then, I used to talk like this and have this kind of voice. And then I came over to New Zealand and people were like, "Ha ha, he's funny, he's different," so I very quickly changed my voice and got this kind of hybrid accent between Kiwi and UK, and it probably went full Kiwi within a couple of months, I'd say.
Wow.
So my subconscious just kind of learnt this accent, so I fit in, and people didn't hassle me, I guess, because it's a very tough time at high school. When everyone is listening to everything you do, and there's lots of social pressure. But I did find that when I talked to my relatives back on the phone to England, my parents would say, "Oh, why were you putting on a British accent?" And I didn't realize I was doing it, but I was code switching back into what was appropriate back home and then backwards. So it was kind of an interesting lesson. So I offer five professional accents now. New Zealand, obviously, which is where I'm based, although it's kind of my weakest accent because I do the least amount of work in New Zealand. And because I wasn't born here, I mean, there are it's like any country. There are various levels of accent within a country. Like you say an American accent, you're like, which American accent? It's the same in New Zealand. There are a bunch of different New Zealand accents. So I find it difficult to find my way in the New Zealand accent because I'm so familiar with overseas markets now. But over New Zealand, Australia is our Australian cousins over the Tasman Sea is a similar accent. There's a few key differences, which were relatively easy to master. Then I offer the British accent, of course, because I can code switch right back into that. An American accent, which I learnt after I had these other three accents, because I mean, it's if you work on the pay to plays, 95% of the work is in a North American accent. So I was like, I want some of that work. And then this new kind of phenomenon, which I kind of brewed up about 3 or 4 years ago, after a conversation with J. Michael Collins, actually, which was a hybrid non-regional global accent, which kind of takes a bit of everything and is the perfect accent for corporates who are trying to be non-regional and to do one video for the whole world. And I've had a few really big gigs through that. Like when the World Health Organization announced what they were going to do about COVID, I recorded the video, which was like, here's what we're going to do in this kind of global accent, which included elements of like a Chinese accent, American accent, like some Australasian. It was a real kind of mixed bag accent, but it was fun to kind of work. Like I say that it's a bespoke custom accent service in a way, and you can take elements of different countries and mix them together. So that's always fun to do. But yeah, I think that original code switch has served me well over the years in order to like tell myself I can do different accents. You just have to listen and repeat and do it over.
And I think you have to have a proclivity for it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I'm still a total accent nerd. If I like to play a game whenever we go to a restaurant and there's a server who's got an interesting accent, I try and guess it. Like I'm like, don't tell me where you're from. Like I want to narrow it down and see if I can get it, which sometimes I'm really good at, and sometimes hopeless.
Very nice. You said that interestingly, you get the least amount of your work in New Zealand. Where does the bulk of your work come from?
Most of my work is being, or actually, in the last 5 years, like the number of jobs I do, mostly it's being British for Americans. So it's doing a British accent for American clients based in New Zealand, which is a very global kind of operation. But recently, I'm the voice of Outback Steakhouse in the United States now.
That's you?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, so, yeah.
Well, I'll check that off because I've been thinking, man, Toby sounds familiar.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, mate. There you go. It's the Outback Steakhouse read.
Right, there you go.
So that's my Aussie. Although it's not like it was so interesting. This is one of these really interesting accent things. When they were casting this, and I kind of got the job. They said, now we want an Australian accent, but we want what Americans think an Australian sounds like, not what they actually sound like. But this is the perception sort of thing. So, yeah, that was a really interesting job, and to try and find out what Americans thought Australians sound like. So it's kind of Crocodile Dundee, Steve Irwin kind of stuff with a few other sort of references and touchstones in there as well.
It's a bit of a parody of itself, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, but it's a really fun gig, and I really enjoy working on those scripts, and because they have some really fun campaigns that they pull out occasionally.
And who'd have thunk that the world's most trusted health organization was using the guy from Outback Steakhouse? Let's talk a little bit about your voice academy. You clearly, from your points earlier, you enjoy being a teacher. How did that come about? How is that going? Do you just cater to New Zealanders and Australians, or is that a worldwide voice academy? Let's hear all about that.
Absolutely, yeah. So it started off as the New Zealand Voice Academy. It actually started, like we haven't really covered in the conversation, but the fact that for most of my career and life, I've been actually on the other side of the glass as an engineer. I started as an engineer. When I say I was an audio enthusiast and building studios, I went into audio engineering and was very happy being the guy on the other side of the glass, pushing the buttons and not being like on camera or on mic. Okay. I worked in radio for many years, and I ended up owning and running a recording studio in Christchurch in New Zealand called Tandem Studios. And one of the things we found was there were lots of people that would come into a recording studio and say, "I want to be a voiceover. I want to be a voice actor or something." And we'd say, "Great! Like show us what you've done." And they'd be like, "Well, I don't have anything because I want to become a voice artist. So how can I just record some ads?" And we were like, "Well, not really, because clients are paying for the studio time, and like it's do you have any acting background?" So there was this weird no man's land between people who were already voiceover actors and people who wanted to be them but had no experience. There was no way to get booth time unless you'd already had booth time to get up to the sort of the grade. And most people who were voiceovers either came through acting and they've got an acting job that turned into a voiceover job, or they were from radio where you just spend all the time in the studio because you're there anyway and they needed a voice. So we identified that there was this gap in the market for someone who, people wanted to try it out, go into the studio, start recording stuff, and basically make a demo reel so they could say, like, I've been in the studio, I know where to start. So that was how it was born, really, and it was 23 years ago that started. It was about 2002, I think it was. And the New Zealand Voice Academy, we thought, why not go big and go the whole country? It was done specifically for that, held at the studio so that people could get some booth time, find out a bit more about what being a voiceover is, and get some recorded stuff to kind of show their friends and show them some basic techniques. That's basically how it goes. We are open to anyone in the world. It's always held in Auckland in New Zealand. the biggest city here. We have a fantastic studio called Native Audio, which is a post-production studio, which is recorded. They're primarily responsible for recording, re-recording a lot of Disney stuff when Disney movies come into the country, and they're dubbed into the Tereo, which is the native official language. They go to Native Audio, so they've got beautiful facilities, like just really nice, and they let us. They give us the run of the place for a whole weekend, and we have 8 people who come on the course. So it's very small class sizes, and we take people get lots of booth time. There's lessons about what studio etiquette is. We do lessons, build up the craft. We start with breathing, of course, because as you know, breathing is the foundation of everything we do as a voice artist. Script interpretation, and then we get into some stuff about like how to start off in voiceover, where the jobs come from. We never tell people like, you could make so much money in voiceover, just do that, because we say it's like those first few years are very hard. Like it's like starting anything brand new. You've got to learn so much before you can really start making money off it. So we teach them about how to do online auditions, or how that will work once they're sort of good enough. And then we finish off with a fantastic afternoon of just being silly and coming up with accents and characters and making characters like converse in a scene, and it all ends with lots of giggles and fun in the studio of what it feels like to be in like a radio drama with silly characters. So yeah, and we run it maybe sort of 4 or 5 times a year, so not that many. And I deliberately restrict it so that we're not, it's only the people that really committed to wanting to come on it, and we still get some sort of truth in it, and it doesn't become repetitive for us. But yeah, you can find out more at your voiceacademy.co.nz if anyone's keen to have a little look.
That's voiceacademy.co.nz, NZ, for New Zealand, obviously. You mentioned the challenges, and there's so much to learn in this business. Let's bring it back to, we're recording this in early 2024. What as you see it, Toby, are the major challenges to somebody coming into this business in the first half of 2024?
I mean, I'll start grimly by saying I don't think it's ever been harder than it is now for a new voiceover starting out, because there are multiple challenges. There's never been more market saturation. There are so many people who want to be voiceover artists, especially in sort of North America, especially since COVID, when everyone reassessed everything and thought, what do I really want to be doing from home? And voiceover was really one of the industries, I think, or online voiceovers like myself who work remotely. We got a huge boon through COVID because so much work had to come through us instead of the traditional studios. So I think lots of people looked at that and thought that's what I want to do, and then put everything they had into it. So it's kind of flooded in that respect. Of course, there's the now ubiquitous presence of AI, which has mopped up so much of the training grounds, I think, that voiceovers used to be able to get a toe in the water, whether it was sort of low budget YouTube videos or e-learning or onboarding videos, or things where performance didn't really matter. It was kind of procedural. It was kind of mechanical. It was just getting the words out right with some kind of sense. And the budget was kind of low, and the clients weren't that fussy. I feel like a lot of that, for convenience sake and probably a bit of cost, has gone to AI now. I think there will be a renaissance back to some kind of humanization, but it's it's anyone's guess at the moment whether that's going to happen and when that will happen and whether the rates will drop because of that. So for those two reasons, I think it is a tough time to get into voiceover. But having said that, I always like to temper it with the fact that there has never been more voiceover work, and there will always be more voiceover work, because there's more content all the time. There are more companies, there are more marketing campaigns, there are more media in order to demonstrate this stuff. So I feel like those two have kind of been like keeping up with each other in terms of the scarcity of voiceover work is becoming less of a thing because there's a lot around, but also like those jobs are being swept up by AI a little bit. So yeah, so it is a tough time to start out in voiceover, but it's one of those things where if you really love doing it, then that's what gives you your energy. And as long as you can support yourself like you would with starting any hobby to start off with, like doing it and getting enjoyment out of it, then that's kind of what matters. And one day that gig will come along, or that client will come along and start like paying you properly, and it'll be a regular gig, and that will be your sort of ticket to sort of to freedom. The tricky bit I find with a lot of students, and myself included, was when do you make the leap? And the leap being going from a side hustle where you've got a day job that's paying your bills, but you can't really apply yourself to being a voiceover artist. You can't spend all day, marketing and coming up with campaigns and doing auditions because you've got this other day job you have to service. And if you do get a job, you're like, I can do it tomorrow between 2 and 5. You can't be as flexible as you need to be a truly great voiceover artist. So at some point you need to say, this is what I'm going to do, like as my job, and I'm going to fully commit to doing it 24/7. And it is 24/7 being a voiceover artist. So like that leap is the toughest bit, to know when you're ready, to have enough savings to carry you through the early period. But it is the only way to go to go full-time professional. Is like at some point you just have to make that call and make the switch.
Looking back, I leaped too early, too soon. Do you have a similar circumstance, or do you feel like, it was a little rough in the beginning, but I think my timing was good?
I had a different approach, and I think I had a lucky approach in terms of it was a time in my life. I'll give you a bit of backstory. I had the recording studio in Christchurch. I had a family and had everything down there. I had put down roots in Christchurch, and it was all sort of going well. And then when was it? 2011, in February, we had the Christchurch earthquake, which was a 6.7 magnitude earthquake right under the city. It shook everything to pieces. Many people lost their lives. It was a really tragic day in New Zealand's history. And my studio was right in the business district of that of Christchurch. So basically overnight was suddenly like, well, you're closed for 6 months. Like that's it. It's kind of all over. At the time, I was actually looking to try and get out of the recording business anyway, because I'd found voiceover and I was kind of like, I kind of want to dabble with this. I kind of want something new.
And so you arranged an entire earthquake just to get out of it. It's amazing.
Exactly. You make the right calls. You know the right people. But it was actually the best thing that, for me personally, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, was that earthquake, because it gave you the freedom suddenly to completely decide what you wanted to do. It was like, you don't have to live here anymore because everything's up in the air. It's basically like you've lost everything. You didn't actually lose everything, but it was like everything was suddenly up in the air, literally, for a second. So it allowed me to kind of reassess and think, well, this life is not quite turning out how I wanted. Like, what would the perfect life look like? And so I reassessed and ended up moving to Auckland, the biggest city, because I was like, I want to live in a different city. I lived in Christchurch all my adult life. I wanted to try something new. And a marriage ended around the same time. There was lots of sort of upheaval. So when I moved to Auckland and got a job at a radio station up here, which is a really funky kind of dance music station. It was very, very casual and very fun to be around. That allowed me to kind of build up the voiceover thing in the background, because I had a studio to use and I could do auditions on the side. But after a few years of radio, I was kind of like, it's not really for me, the big city thing. I met a lovely girlfriend, now my wife, who we decided to move to the country together. So we were like, we're just going to run away to this, to 4 hours in the middle of nowhere. And that allowed me, like, if you move a long way from anywhere, the rent's typically very low, because we actually end up house sitting. So we were house sitting at someone's house and paying like, I don't know, $50 or $100 a week. Wow. So if you go into something like that, and I built a studio out of some gear I had left over from the recording days, although, these days you could set up a decent studio for like $2,500 probably, like it's not much at all. And as long as you get your living costs exceptionally low, the pressure to have to succeed straight away in voiceover isn't there. So you don't have to suddenly make $1,000 a week to make your mortgage payments or whatever. If you can get rid of, instead of the supply side, if you can get rid of the demand side in terms of outgoings, it's very easy to make a living out of voiceover early on, because you can just do like an IVR job and you've made your quota for the week, So that was my strategy, was to get the demand side, to get the costs out of my life, and then the voiceover thing could build up over time. And really, I've continued with that attitude. Like, we're completely self-sufficient on this property now in terms of like water and power and food. So we could, like, for COVID, it was a great test of our zombie apocalypse strategy, as we call it. Where we own all the utilities infrastructure, and so we can be fairly self-sufficient.
So you're completely off the grid where you are.
Yeah, exactly. Apart from this internet connection we're talking through now, which Starlink keeps dropping every now and again.
I apologize.
But so yeah, it's and I feel like that's a good strategy for success, because then you don't have this mindset of like, oh, I have to do this week, I have to make this much money, and it's really stressful if I don't, and that affects my performance. You can kind of be more of a leaf in the wind and go where your nose follows you, and have a bit more flexibility in terms of the financial stuff in your life. So yeah, if people are I know a lot of people are tied down by sort of mortgages and relationships and existing jobs, but if you can get out of that rat race and reassess everything, it's a lot easier to jump into a voiceover career if your outgoings are really low, because there's much less pressure on everything.
Well, I think there are two ways to look at it, right? There is, I can hang in this and try and make enough money and save enough money and get by and try and not really put my lifestyle through a whole lot of upheaval. Or the other side of the coin is I can sacrifice. Maybe I have a more stoic personality, and maybe there are things in my life that I do want to give up. And that gives me an opportunity to do that, lower my overhead, and make the transition that way. But you've got to do one, the other, or a combination of both, because if you think you're going to make the leap, as you put it, without making some sort of sacrifice, I think you're being naive.
Yeah, absolutely. Unless you've got lots of savings. If you can, I had some savings coming out of Auckland, so I was like, I've got 6 months. I gave myself like a term of 6 months where basically I'm paying myself a salary out of my savings. This is the time, like, you don't have to make any money, but you just have to put in the good groundwork. So I built the studio, got all that working well, paid some voiceover subscription fees to like the online pay-to-plays, and just started auditioning like crazy. And within 6 months, like after that savings period had expired, I was making as much as I did from the radio job that I'd left.
That's fantastic.
Because of that constant, effort for 6 months, 24/7 effectively. Well, it wasn't 24/7, but it was definitely more than a day job of just constantly marketing, getting better, and getting yourself out there. Yeah.
I often say that, and I think this is true for just about any entrepreneur, much less freelancers, much less voice actors. There will come a time, 100% guaranteed, when you will want to quit, when you will say, this is too hard, I can't do this, I'm not good enough. Whatever the story that's running a loop in your head is, you're going to hit that point. Do you remember the first time that hit for you?
Possibly not, because I was living in the country with these low overheads. Life was good. When I wasn't auditioning, I was probably doing some yard work or something active outside. I was looking for other things to supplement my income, because it's not good to have all your eggs in one basket. And I still have other side hustles that I do, like real estate photography is something random that I ended up doing. I don't need the money anymore, but I still do it because it gets me out of the house. It gives me another thing. Again, it makes me less desperate as a voiceover artist, because if everything dries up tomorrow, which is very unlikely to happen, but if it did, I've still got that other thing to feed myself and to provide a little bit of income. So I think it's good to have more than one. I know I'm contradicting myself slightly in saying, you have to be a voiceover 24/7 and also have side hustles. But if you can, it is good to have side hustles. Again, it's about taking the pressure off being a voiceover and having all your eggs in one basket there. You do have to apply a lot of time in the early days to sort of get the runs on the board. But it's a bit like dating. It's like if you come across clients and they can hear how desperate you are for the work, you are not attractive as a client. Like it's good to be able to take stuff and leave stuff, and not have to be lowballed by clients that are saying, well, you can do it for $100. It's good to be able to walk away from that and say, well, no, I'm worth more than $100. And because otherwise it's a slippery slope, and you don't want to be working 80-hour weeks and only earning not much as a voiceover artist. It's that's important too.
Well, I agree with you. And I've said, in fact, I said it in Dallas at One Voice USA last year, that I think one of the transitions that we're making in voiceover and possibly freelancing overall is, I think in order to future-proof ourselves a little bit, what you say is true. If you can diversify your streams of income and maybe see yourself less as I'm a voice actor and a little bit more as I'm a creative who is primarily a voice actor, but I also do X, Y, and Z, right? And they may be adjacent to voice acting. They may be like real estate photography, not so adjacent, but you have a creative suite of services that you can offer people so that it provides variety to your income, but as you just pointed out, it also provides variety to your life and gets you out of the house when you needed to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree that variety is the spice of life. And if you are just locked in your booth doing 80-hour weeks in the auditions, which I kind of hinted at earlier is required, but I mean, I think you can do that for a little bit, but it's not sustainable in the long term. Like, I think setting up a good base, it's good to really get amongst those different markets. But yeah, once you are set up and it's good to be less dependent on the one thing in order to get by and have a bit more variety, for sure. Like, it's very important.
You've obviously built a stellar career in the last several years. What do you think, in as much as you can share it, the future looks like for you? What haven't you done yet that you still see out there on the horizon? What are your white whales?
The white whales. I'm a big believer in these. I call them BHAGs. Have you heard the term BHAG?
Oh, yeah.
Hairy Audacious Goal.
Audacious goal, exactly.
Yeah, because I have set many of these over the years, and they have a habit of coming true. They seem so audacious at the outset. Like, I want to make a full-time living out of voiceover, which was my first BHAG, and then it happened. And I was like, I want to do international commercials, and then it happened. And then what was my next one? It was. I think there was one, you sometimes have to adjust them. One was to be flown over to America to do a voiceover job. But then, like, that was at the period, like, I guess before COVID and when climate change was the thing. And I was like, I don't feel good about that anymore. I don't want to travel. I'd actually rather do it from home now. So I adjusted that big, hairy, audacious goal. I'm being the voice of a national brand in the States. And we've done that with Outback. The next one is probably, what is the next one? I think I'm searching for my next one at the moment, to be honest. But it would, what would it be? Yeah, I'm still thinking. I think I need to firm that up. And
you used an interesting phrase. You said they have a habit of coming true. Explain that. What does that mean when you say my big, hairy, audacious goals have a habit of coming true? That language to me is very interesting.
Yeah, so it's interesting to me too, because I feel like they seem impossible when you make them, because you're just like, I just love to do that. I can't imagine how I can do it. Somehow your subconscious and the decisions you make after that point will all just, like a compass, just kind of tend in a different direction. So at least you have the stick on the horizon. At least you have a stick on the horizon. If you're going for a hike and you don't have a stick on the horizon, you will get lost. Like, there's no point in walking around in circles. So the thing with a big, hairy, audacious goal, in my belief, is that it focuses where you want your life to go, and then other decisions you make on the periphery, or sometimes sort of in the primary, that your subconscious is making often, will direct you towards that point. So if you hadn't made that point, your decisions would have been a bit more random. You don't really know where you're going. You're trying lots of things, but without any clear direction. So it simplifies a lot of your decisions to head for that North Star. And then suddenly the culmination of all those decisions that you make is that you arrive there and you're like, wow, I'm here. Like, how did I get here? It's because you made all those left and right turns to get to where you are. And it's that classic aphorism of if you don't have a target, you're sure to hit it. Something like that. Why can't I remember it off the bat suddenly? I'm going to mess it up completely. I'm going to murder it.
A penny saved is a sailor's delight. No, that's not it. That's not it either. No, I think
if you aim at nothing, you're sure to hit it. That's what it is.
There you go.
Aim at nothing, you're sure to hit it. Yeah.
I think you're right. And what you're talking about is direction. I feel like direction is half of the equation.
Yeah.
The other half, I believe, is the daily steps, the action, the consistency. Talk about that in your life.
Absolutely. Something, a big project that I had for a while when I was doing voiceover and it was all going very well. And I switched like my big, hairy, audacious goal from voiceover stuff to life stuff, which was that I wanted to build my own house, like a forever house. I wanted to build the house I was going to live in until the day I die, which is a pretty big, audacious goal. So I built this enormous house. What's 250 square meters? Not sure what that is in feet, but it's a large house made out of hempcrete here in the New Zealand jungle. Primarily by myself, with a little bit of help from other people where I needed it, but like overall myself. I've got a bit of a DIY background, but not a builder at all.
Okay.
And I kind of look back at this project and I wonder how on earth I did it, because it's a giant house and people come and they say, how did you do this? And I'm like, I don't really know. But I think what the key to that is, and this can be like used in different contexts, is that you have this giant plan and you're like, right, well, what are the 4 big steps I need to do it? Like, oh, okay, foundations, subfloor, walls, roof. Well, so you break it up into those and you take one of those. You take the subfloor and you're like, well, what does the subfloor need? Well, it needs the poles in the ground and it needs this and this and this. And what do I need for the poles in the ground? Well, I need to dig a hole. So you can break any giant goal down into its component parts. And then all you have to do is just do those one by one. And then readjust as necessary along the way if something's not working properly, or take a step back and look at the whole project again. But very important that when you're doing these steps and when you're going through these motions, that you're just focusing on that action at the time and you're not maintaining a broad view, because it becomes overwhelming. If you're if you're digging the hole for the first stump and you're like, I've got to build this house, I've got to build this giant house, it's just not going to work. So I'm just digging this hole, and then I'll dig the next hole, and then I'll dig the next hole, and 140 holes later, and you're onto putting stuff in the hole. And so as long as you can maintain the passion for that end goal, that's what drives you, that it doesn't become completely debilitating, then you just focus on these little steps, and eventually there's this huge molehill that you've built. So I think you can apply that to voiceover career. I think you can apply it to most things, is to break it down into its most simplest form and then just carry out those steps.
I think you're absolutely right. We say in VOPro all the time, eat the elephant in small chunks.
Exactly.
Or build a house with very tiny bricks.
Exactly. Grains of sand, one by one.
Right. Toby Ricketts, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. We've never been able to be on the same continent to give each other a hug, but I consider you a friend, and it's just been lovely getting to know you today, man.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fantastic. And I hope to be over at Voiceover Atlanta, not this year, but probably next year.
Okay.
I'm going to aim to come over for Voiceover Atlanta next year. So,
there'll be a drink of your choice waiting for you at the bar. Toby, where can people find you when they want to look at Gravy for the Brain Oceania, Toby Ricketts, the voice actor, or maybe even the Voice Academy?
Absolutely. So you can find me at tobyrickettsvoiceover.com. Nice and catchy. And then oceania.gravyforthebrain.com is for the Gravy for the Brain stuff. And then voiceacademy.co.nz is NZ is where you can find the Voice Academy stuff. But yeah, I'd love to hear from those people out there. And there's my YouTube channel as well, VO Life. You can just find it at youtube.com/Toby Ricketts, and you'll find up there at the moment an interview with the redoubtable Paul Schmidt, which has just gone up in the last few days.
Dude, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.